For our discussion board, I chose to talk about the Freedom Trail in Boston, Massachusetts. The Freedom Trail, according to one of our resources this week, is a 2.5-mile long stretch of path painted along the roadways in the city of Boston that marks major landmarks throughout Boston of major revolutionary era events. One of those is the Meeting House in Boston, where the Sons of Liberty met quite often, and probably the most prominent Sons of Liberty person was, of course, Samuel Adams himself. Samuel Adams would be in this meeting house, and at one time he said, "Enough is enough, there's time for action, we must act now." And shortly later that evening, or later that day, that following week, they went out and committed what we know today as the Boston Tea Party. Of course, the Freedom Trail and studying the Revolution could not be fulfilled without mentioning Paul Revere and his famous ride that he did in the middle of the night. And Paul Revere gets some notoriety from a poet, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, as he states, "One if by land and two if by sea, and I on the opposite shore will be," talking about whether the British are coming by land or by sea and hanging a lantern in the Old North Church. Of course, we know they would come by land to Lexington and Concord. And one of the interesting stops on this Freedom Trail is the Old North Church, where lanterns were hung. And you get to go in, and it's a different type of church. They don't have pews that are like your normal church with pews all along. They're almost like cubicles in an office, and you open the little door and you can go in and sit down where the Hancock family sat, or where the Adams family sat, or where the Revere family sat. And I've been there once or twice. It's really neat. Really, you get a sense that you're in a solace place of history that was being made every time they met there to worship God. Probably the most interesting and most somber place on the Freedom Trail is probably the Bunker Hill Memorial, or the Bunker Hill Monument. This, of course, is honoring the Battle of Bunker Hill, and it is the first major battle that happens right there in the heart of Boston. Of course, that will happen after the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and this is going to be the battle where we have the famous phrase, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." Bunker Hill will be also the battle where Dr. Benjamin Warren will pass away. He will die in battle, and from the hands of Thomas Gage, the British general. And Dr. Ben Warren was a close friend of Sam Adams. And this will further Sam Adams' cause as he makes inroads and strides at the Continental Congresses to get some action done, get the Declaration written, and have a formal voice and letter sent to the English throne. The cornerstone of this monument was laid in 1825 by someone none other than Marquis de Lafayette, who was almost like a son to General George Washington, and it was finished in 1842. And of course, those I found on the Freedom Trail website that is out there for the public to see as they plan their visit for Boston, Massachusetts. The last thing that I found in a source that we had available on our Liberty Library online is a quote from the Public Historian Journal, where this person states that John Adams was convinced that, he says, quote, "Our own original historians are very much neglected." He goes on to say, "Sam Adams and John Hancock were, quote, almost buried in oblivion." And in a day in which we are having monuments torn down, statues being torn down because it offends someone, I'm thrilled that Boston has this Freedom Trail for any person of any age, young or old, to go and be a part of, to establish the worldview that we need to see, that it was only by God's grace, through this era of the Revolution, that we have the nation that we are blessed to live in today.